This is the declassified 15-page 1962 document entitled Cuba Project, and is also known as Operation Northwoods. This video is not going to be an exhaustive look at the document, but it will present the highlights of this criminal plan to severely harm the citizens of two countries. If you want to study this for yourself, a link to the entire document is provided in the description below. Operation Northwoods exposes John F. Kennedy's Joint Chiefs of Staff under General Lemnitzer as they outlined a plan that would devise, quote, pretexts which would provide justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba, end quote. In other words, they're going to bring about tragic events that will cause the American people to become sympathetic toward and even beg the government to enter into war with Cuba. First, I'll outline the plan found in the document, and then I'll provide you with the unbelievable quotes of that document. The first part of the plan is to create a bad guy, Cuba. Being careful not to involve the Soviet Union, time is of the essence. The U.S. must strike before an alliance is made between those two countries. Smear the international image of Cuba through false flag military operations that implicate Cuba as the culprit. Paint a false picture in the eyes of the international community to make the U.S. and other countries look like the suffering parties who are justified in striking back. Initiate a propaganda campaign that will deceive the masses into believing that our very lives and liberties are being attacked. Then wait for the outcry from the people begging the government to punish the bad guy. It's a simple, effective, time-tested equation. Problem, reaction, solution. The real bad guy covertly creates the problem. In response to that problem, the people beg the creator of the problem to save them, not knowing that their savior is the problem maker. Next, the initiator of the problem sells the confused people a solution that benefits the ones who created the problem in the first place, and the profits of war are covertly sifted from the pockets of the commoners into the coffers of the elite. As unbelievable as this story seems, here are the words of the actual document. The Joint Chiefs of Staff have considered the attached memorandum for the Chief of Operations, Cuba Project, which responds to a request of that office for brief but precise description of pretexts which would provide justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. It is recognized that any action which becomes pretext for U.S. military intervention in Cuba will lead to a political decision which then would lead to military action. The suggested course of action appended to Enclosure A are based on the premise that U.S. military intervention will result from a period of heightened U.S.-Cuban tensions which place the United States in the position of suffering justifiable grievances. World opinion and the United Nations Forum should be favorably affected by developing the international image of the Cuban government as rash and irresponsible, and as an alarming and unpredictable threat to the peace of the Western Hemisphere. While the foregoing premise can be utilized at the present time, it will continue to hold good only as long as there can be reasonable certainty that U.S. military intervention in Cuba would not directly involve the Soviet Union. Here they reiterate that they're going to focus all efforts on the objective of justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. Such a plan could enable a logical buildup of incidents to be combined with other seemingly unrelated events to camouflage the ultimate objective and create the necessary impression of Cuban rashness and irresponsibility on a large scale, directed at other countries as well as the United States. The desired resultant from the execution of this plan would be to place the United States in the apparent position of suffering defensible grievances from a rash and irresponsible government of Cuba, and to develop an international image of a Cuban threat to peace in the Western Hemisphere. Since it would seem desirable to use legitimate provocation as the basis for U.S. military intervention in Cuba, a cover and deception plan to include requisite preliminary actions could be executed as an initial effort to provoke Cuban reaction. Harassment plus deceptive actions to convince the Cubans of imminent invasion would be emphasized. Our military posture throughout the execution of the plan will allow a rapid change from exercise to intervention if Cuban response justifies. A series of well-coordinated incidents will be planned to take place in and around Guantanamo to give genuine appearance of being done by hostile Cuban forces. Incidents to establish a credible attack, not in chronological order. Number 1, start rumors. Many use clandestine radio. Land friendly Cubans in uniforms over the fence to stage attack on base. Capture Cuban-friendly saboteurs inside the base. Start riots near the base main gate. Blow up ammunition inside the base. Start fires. Burn aircraft on airbase. Sabotage. Lob mortar shells from outside the base into base. Some damage to installations. Capture assault teams. Capture militia groups. Sabotage ships in harbor. Large fires. Sink ship near harbor entrance. United States would respond by executing offensive operations to secure water and power supplies. Remember, the main incident could be arranged in several forms. We could blow up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay and blame Cuba. We could blow up a drone, unmanned vessel anywhere in the Cuban waters. We could arrange to cause such incident in the vicinity of Havana or Santiago as a spectacular result of Cuban attack from the air or sea, or both. The presence of Cuban planes or ships merely investigating the intent of the vessel could be fairly compelling evidence that the ship was taken under attack. The nearness to Havana or Santiago would add credibility, especially to those people that might have heard the blast or have seen the fire. The U.S. could follow up with an air-sea rescue operation covered by U.S. fighters to, quote, evacuate remaining members of the non-existent crew. Casualty lists in U.S. newspapers could cause a helpful wave of national indignation. We could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area, in other Florida cities, and even in Washington. A terror campaign could be pointed at Cuban refugees seeking haven in the United States. We could sink a boatload of Cubans en route to Florida, real or simulated. We could foster attempts on lives of Cuban refugees in the United States, even to the extent of wounding in instances, to be widely publicized. Exploding a few plastic bombs in carefully chosen spots. Use of MiG-type aircraft by U.S. pilots could provide additional provocation. Harassment of civil air, attacks on surface shipping, and destruction of U.S. military drone aircraft by MiG-type planes would be useful as complementary actions. An F-86 properly painted could convince air passengers that they saw a Cuban MiG, especially if the pilot of the transport were to announce such a fact. Hijacking attempts against civil air and surface craft should appear to continue as harassing measures condoned by the government of Cuba. It is possible to create an incident which will demonstrate convincingly that a Cuban aircraft has attacked and shot down a charter civil airliner en route from the United States to Jamaica, Guatemala, Panama, or Venezuela. An aircraft at Eglin Air Force Base would be painted and numbered as an exact duplicate for a civil registered aircraft belonging to a CIA proprietary organization in the Miami area. At a designated time, the duplicate would be substituted for the actual civil aircraft and would be loaded with the selected passengers, all boarded under carefully prepared aliases. The actual registered aircraft would be converted to a drone. It is possible to create an incident which will make it appear that communist Cuban MiGs have destroyed a U.S. Air Force aircraft over international waters